please.
5 minutes, yes.
Okay, 5 minutes we have agreed, please, because you have not even addressed the issue of fidelity to political parties, which I think is key.
I think the two
We can do that in a minute.
And the gender rule is not yet.
I think the gender rule has been so well canvassed before this committee, but not so much the issue of Jubilee, for example.
It is 403
You want to
and
get away
408
without
you
talking
should
about
start.
Jubilee. So for that, just take...
We are guided, the gender rule is up. CK, 1 minute.
We'll take into account the gender rule.
Thank you very much. I think it's important that we give Azimio women this chance because we actually put together a memorandum to this
Proceed.
So as Azimio women, there are 3 broad issues that we have canvassed, and we have looked at the 6 bills that have been in Parliament that have failed. We've also looked at the 6 petitions that have been to the Office of the Chief Justice that have also failed, and we also looked at the BBI. And therefore, we saw 3 overarching ideas. One, the issue of anchoring the responsibility and implementation of the 2/3 gender rule in the Constitution. And we hold the view that a lot of these things must be anchored in the Constitution, including the formula of exactly how to execute the 2/3 gender rule. There is the issue of the proportional member representation. That has been canvassed greatly. We have looked at models like what is going on in South Africa, where then where people are elected not based on constituencies, but based on both genders and both representation. There is also the proposition of Senate having a 50-50 presentation, having 47 female senators and 47 male senators. That has been canvassed largely by the women as one of the propositions. So to the formula that we think can unstick us is a basic formula, really. I know it looks like it has lots of algebra, but what we're saying is look at the proportion of elected underrepresented gender. And when we say gender, sometimes people think it's about women, but really it's only because women are currently the underrepresented gender. So we're saying that that proportion should add to a variable that we are calling X, and it should be equals to the 34% constitutional requirement on the number of underrepresented gender in both parliaments. So that's a simple formula. So all we're saying is after the election, look at how many women have been elected, look at the proportion that is required to make the constitutional requirement, and top up the rest. I thank you very much.
Well, that's exactly what's happening at the counties, isn't it? So you're saying
we're saying that we bolster the
we borrow from the counties, county assemblies.
Article 177.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Dewa Njiro. I am here to submit on the position.
You have 2 minutes. We said yes, you have 2 minutes.
And as such, Honorable Chair, we are here to...
Just a point of order. Did you say you want to submit on the police brutality? For political parties?
No, political parties.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a thing I personally would urge that you put on the table.
Thank you, Chair. We are addressing the question of political infidelity that has been perpetrated by the current regime, and most especially when it comes to the question of Jubilee. We have seen impunious acts and conduct that have been perpetrated, one by the Office of the Registrar. The Office of the Registrar is holding brief for the current regime to the extent that she has mutilated her functions as decreed by the Political Parties Act. It is therefore a recommendation that the Office of the Registrar ought to be made independent, and that it ought to be insulated from the interferences that has come from the current regime. Number 2, on the question of minority and the majority in Parliament. The reason why the majority and minority in Parliament has been mutilated to the extent that now the person who is sitting in the minority ought to be sitting in the majority, that is Honorable Opio Andai, is because Parliament has been captured by the executive. And how did we begin this capture? We began by the fact when we had the Speaker of the National Assembly being an affiliated and an active partner of the ruling coalition. That means that person lost his objectivity and his impartiality, and that is why by the ruling that was delivered on that particular fateful day to the Kenyans, we ended up losing the majority. Number 3, why are we having political parties infidelity? Is because the state is the one that is creating aggression and rebellion in political parties. And we've seen a state-sponsored rebellion within Jubilee political party to the extent that individuals who were nominated by Jubilee, by Azimio to parliament, they are now dining and wining with the state. And that is an aggression against Article 4. It is a mutilation of Article 4 in the sense that it has completely changed the dynamics and the diagram, the political diagram of political party, of multi-party democracy. And perhaps that could have been caused and triggered by the history that this country has undergone. There are some individuals who perhaps may or may not be involved. They are the ones now at the realm of power. They were not involved in the fight against multi-party democracy. They were not involved in the promulgation of the new constitution, and therefore they do not understand the dictates and the provisions of the new constitution. So we are calling upon Kenyans and recommending that political parties must be respected because it's the backbone of our democracy. The office of the registrar must be constituted by a person who is capable of adjudicating over the disputes, and for this we are proposing that the holder of that office must at least be a person who is capable of being appointed to an office of a judge. I rest my case.
Thank you.
Well, can we now ask questions or clarifications? Committee?
Yes, Madam Chair, we wish you could allow. Yes.
It is the committee
Honorable.
that I'm allowing now to ask questions, clarifications, whatever it is.
Indeed, I go first.
Thank you. Senator Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. I want to appreciate the team from Azimio for finding time to as well come because I think like both of you chairs have guided, it's important that we speak to each other and not talk at each other, because that is what was prevailing. I have listened to the presentation of Azimio and I have a few questions or perhaps comments, chairs. In your presentation, Governor Nderitu, would you perhaps maybe care to just elaborate, because I saw, and your presentation was quite an interesting one, because it has what you would easily refer to as political juxtaposition. All your data all your data and statistics curiously begin from September or thereabouts 2022. Somebody will easily imagine that either the country didn't exist before then, or for some reason it's not an area that we need to focus, but that is not important. What is the place of political instability? Political instability as a factor and a contributor to the deteriorating state of our economy. Because I see you listed quite a number of factors, our import and the rest. What is the significance of that aspect? Second and last comment, Chair, is that the presentation on the audit is something that perhaps struck my curiosity, because, you know, these are issues that have been canvassed. And the simple question one will ask, if you didn't know better, is where was all this information during the Supreme Court hearings? Because the funny bit is, the stories that you are now canvassing before the committee were equally brought to the attention of the Supreme Court. If you read the ruling of the Supreme Court, I think from paragraph 140 all the way to 144, it goes into detail about these alleged forms and IBC presentations that is now being made before this committee, that were then made before the Supreme Court, and that the finding of the Supreme Court were that those were not legitimate documents. It didn't come from IBC, but it came from your side, and when checked or counter-checked against what IBC presented before the court, they were found actually to be forgeries. And it's elaborate, captured. Supreme Court ruling 140 to paragraph 140 to 144. You know, finally, Chair, it's important even as we present this committee to remain factual. I know for a fact, for example, just to pick curiously out of the presentation by Governor Nderitu, I saw he presented, let's say, a count of MCAs. I know for a fact that if you check the count of MCAs across the Republic, Kenya Kwanza has well over 692 elected MCAs. Azimio has 561, without including even the contested parties, which include UDM and what's the name, the Kiraitu party, and the rest. The margin is elaborate. So even as we come to present before the committee, let us not forget that there is a history of what led to us being here and remain factual about it. You know, Chair, just in 10 seconds as a last comment, there is a question which I was hoping perhaps Nerito and his team will respond to. And this was asked by Justice Smokin Wanjala in the case of the Supreme Court. He didn't mention that, okay, we hear your case. As Azimio, you make the argument that you don't trust the technology that was used, that somehow it was hacked. Then he asked, explain to us then how the forms that were physical, marked and signed at the polling station, equally transported eventually before to the National Tallying Center. How could somebody have made an alteration? Because if you recall, and there are quite a number of you that participated in that exercise, randomly, just out of the blues, the Supreme Court picked, I think there were 15 or 30 or something polling stations, and they say, please counter check what is on the portal if it matches randomly. And curiously, 100%, word for word, point for point, figure for figure, they matched. And that is something which has never been explained up to date. That's why you could make the case and say, oh, we didn't trust the technology, there are these stories about the forms, what about the physical one? Where were they hacked?
Okay, somebody else?
I wanted to find out, sorry.
Yes, Honorable Andai.
I wanted to find out this mutilation or inversion of Jubilee Party by what you refer to as the state, okay? To what extent has it contributed to the erosion of the multi-party democratic culture as was envisaged by the liberators, the second liberation heroes? And finally, on Jubilee again, those who you would want to refer to as masqueraders, who have taken over Jubilee from the legitimate owners, to what extent have they gone in terms of misappropriating the resources of Jubilee? Yes.
Hassan?
One of our former cabinet secretaries is here, and Eugene usually proudly refers to his stint in those previous governments, in the previous government. I think Nerito being, I think, a person in the finance field, in the economic, I think that's your background. I think you've realized over the last 10, 15 years, Kenya has become a net importer of food. We import everything. It's not a situation that we crystallized, it's a situation that we found. So closer to the elections, because there are real natural market forces there, you decide to subsidize consumption. Kenya Kwanza comes in and decides to subsidize production. The whole idea is to ease partly the demand on the dollar, which we mopped 4.2 billion to 5 billion annually to buy food. Maharagwe, viazi, not viazi, what is it? Mahindi, mchele, sukari, everything. So what we say, let's provide fertilizer. Let's boost our production so that we ease the demand on the dollar. This dollar you're talking about, we started a G2G program about 4 months ago. At that point, you laughed at Bomas when the current president was presenting. Don't laugh again. You might end up having the last laugh. So we started the G2G 4 or 5 months ago. When we did the G2G, the dollar was doing 139, 140. It slid back to about 130, and then it went up again. Because there's still a demand on the dollar. There are Kenyans with holding dollars. There is $8.5 in the market, $1 billion in the market. Kenyans are not releasing these dollars for speculative reasons, and for that reason we have an artificial crisis that is occasioned by the shortage of dollar, and that's why the Kenya shilling is sliding as part of the rationale that you can also use as you try to help us to navigate this crisis. So my understanding the dollar, understanding what we are doing in terms of the right things and the wrong things. So how does demonstrations help to bring down the dollar prices? How does demonstrations help to bring any of this sanity into our market? Number two, you know, I was part of a political formation that you have currently joined. I'm now on this side. Some of my friends, Opio and I, are on that side. You know, it's not the first time after an election we've had our own results and our own numbers and our own tally. So I think these kind of results, if they did not find traction in where they needed to be presented, it is a good political narrative for you to have to galvanize your support base. But I think the truth is, as one of the lawyers told you, let it go. It's time we move on.
Well, you may not like what he's saying, but some, even us seated here, didn't like all you said, but we were silent.
We have the right to...
That's the difference, yeah.
One thing, Deritu, if you allow me, because you're representing Azimio la Umoja in Kenya, what would you say to the role of Parliament with regard to strengthening multi-party democracy, and particularly coalition arrangements? I'm surprised you didn't point out the fact that these coalitions, deputy whip in Parliament, is not working for the coalition. I'm surprised you left that out, and I think it's important to point that particular aspect out.
Yes, sir. Honorable Eugene.
Thank you very much. I think my colleague Honorable Omar is really trying to defend the indefensible on matters cost of living. Of course, he must justify why the dollar has misbehaved.
Maybe again, you could also have a friend say, is it applicable to the Tanzanian shilling? Because there's a presentation. If the people holding dollars, are they holding the shilling?
Tanzania imports less than we do in terms of food. In fact, Tanzania even exports to Kenya. So therefore, their demand on the dollar is not as high as our demand on the dollar, and therefore it's been a certain weakening by a shilling or so of the Kenyan shilling on the basis of the demand. Secondly, we have removed the controls that the central bank used to have. The central bank used to fix a dollar rate on a daily basis. So you go to buy in interbanks, you get a better rate. You go out in the market, you get a lower rate, you get a much higher rate. So we decided to allow these controls out so that this dollar swims in its own market.
Okay, let's allow it.
That's okay. That's okay.
I think I've been given the opportunity.
I will have a session with Omar and teach him how we did foreign exchange liberalization, even under Moi.
And I will also teach you what we are doing right now.
No, you haven't answered the question about the Tanzanian shilling.
Kindly, Honorable Eugene.
I think the team appearing before this committee today, if it was a case, this would be the main complainant on behalf of the people of the Republic of Kenya. And we cannot say how do protests help, how do demonstrations help, how do carrying sufriyas help, because we know that protests helped us get a new constitution. It's actually protests when our founding fathers protested and went to the forest against British rule. That's how the British were removed from here. It's protests in Eldred when children's money was stolen, the Finland Fund, that has brought fellows to be arrested to court, and there are 200 witnesses against them. There are protests that led to the stoppage of mechanization in Kericho. When jobs were being taken away from our people in Kericho, they protested. So you cannot say protests mean nothing. because there are those protests that have led us to sit here in Bomas today. So why we're here is to talk to each other, not at each other. And to look at the challenges facing our nation and come reason together to see how we can find solutions. So Governor Nderitu Mreithi, you as the presenter on behalf of the complainant, I want you to just restate the facts. We didn't get the figures properly. Senator Aaron has said on the issues of the wards, he has given the figures. I think just for the record, you are saying according to the evidence that you have, the number of votes that according to your evidence that Raila Odinga got, can you be specific? It was at the tail end of your presentation, it didn't come out clearly. The number of constituencies that Azimio won versus Kenya Kwanza, and the counties and the regions. I think we want a clear picture because we can see a blue and a yellow map, but you are not clear on the figures that you are talking about. And we are asking for opening of this service so that the truth can set this nation free. So that is why we're here. Apart from the issue of the cost of living, many Kenyans cannot make ends meet, and that is why they went to the streets. You have made proposals, and I'm hoping in your detailed presentation, you have proposed the specific taxes. It's not just enough to say reduction of taxes. The churches, the religious leaders have said, reduce the taxes. FKE has been here. We have professionals who have been here. All of them are talking the same language. But to help this committee, and we know your vast experience in matters finance, please be specific. Like on fuel, we have about 16 taxes and levies. Which ones are you specifically proposing should be scrapped or reviewed downwards? Because that is what really sent the cost of living high when we moved VAT from 8 to 16%. On electricity, we have almost another 10. So putting 20 levies and new taxes at once on the shoulders of a Kenyan. Please be specific in your recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Response, 5 last minutes, kindly.
Excuse me, I had one question on it.
Yeah, but let it be as brief as possible.
Yeah. Now, thank you, Governor Nderitu. Part of, the task of this committee is to address issues of accountability, issues of impunity. Now, you have presented some graphic cases where the police are alleged to have used brutal force against Kenyans. Now, from the data that you have, because, even in America, we see some rogue policemen, but you will see action being taken against them. They will be arrested and prosecuted like any criminal. Now, from where you are sitting, do you have any indication as to whether there is any single police officer who has been arrested, taken to court, and charged for any crimes committed against Kenyans by the police? Thank you.
Thank you. Kindly take note, you have exactly 5 minutes. We have about 10 more teams waiting out there since 2 p.m. Kindly.
No police officer, to our knowledge, has been held to account. As a matter of fact, they have been congratulated by the highest leadership in the regime. I agree with the co-chair that we may not always agree with what each other is saying. I think that's why we are talking. The senator may not agree with our figures, but isn't that why we need an audit? That's the whole point. Yeah, that we are looking for a neutral arbiter to do so. The question that
he asked about the Supreme Court. The whistleblower came way after the Supreme Court matter had been settled. On the matter of Jubilee Party and the illusion of multipartyism, the whole parties are the foundation of democracy. Without functioning political parties, we cannot possibly have democracy. It is incumbent on any regime in power to let parties operate in a manner that is contemplated in the Constitution. So the continued aggression against Jubilee Party, the fact that Jubilee Party and other parties, when they change parliamentary leadership, for example, those changes are not implemented because speakers have taken a partisan view. It is well known, for instance, that Jubilee Party and Azimio coalition have communicated changes to who should be the deputy whip in the assembly, and this has for more than 6-7 months not been acted upon by the speaker. So it is clear and that if we continue on this trajectory, we will certainly go back to where we were in the days of a single party system. On the question of resources of Jubilee Party, and this is a matter being also contested in court, the evidence is that the masqueraders have been allowed by certain actions of officers of state to access Jubilee resources from their accounts. Citizens go to the streets because all other avenues are closed to them. It's not the citizens' wish that they wake up every day and they go to Maandamano. So if you ask the question that how does Maandamano help manage the economy, you are obviously asking the wrong question. Citizens, Article 1 of the Constitution gives sovereignty to the citizens. The Commission before us said citizens donate powers to those they elect. So if those we elect are not paying fidelity to the Constitution, that is why citizens go to the streets. Regimes that become dictatorial, when citizens complain, they say that that is political instability. But I also want to remind regimes, not just in Kenya, but throughout the continent of Africa, you have seen that citizens do in fact get regimes out of power.
Governor, less than a minute.
On the G2G program, it did not address any of the issues of the cost of living. It actually added costs. Which costs? Interest rates on or interest paid on the LCs. It added, as the honorable member observed, the exchange rate loss, and those are the things that were transmitted to the citizen this September. The reason petrol and fuel prices in general went up is because of the effect of the G2G. It is not because of international crude prices, and we have demonstrated so to the committee.
Chair, there was a question that was put to me by Honorable the Majority Leader Kupio Ndai. The question of the embezzlement of the resources of Jubilee. We must all understand that the motivating factor that has caused rebellion in Jubilee was not for the proper management of the party, but for the purposes of grabbing the resources that belongs to Jubilee. As we speak, that is happening. The spillage of the political party funds and the properties of Jubilee is happening under the watch and under the auspices and guidance and supervision of the registrar of political party. Letters have been written because the High Court gave conservatory orders dictating that the current office is the one that is going to exist until the case is heard and determined. Even with that order, impunity has dictated to those offices that orders should not be respected, that the rebellious group in Jubilee should manage the resources. I am informed as we speak about 90 million Kenyan shilling cannot be traced, cannot be accounted, no transparency. It was never sanctioned by the party. That is the kind of the democracy we have established. Finally, on the question of the impartiality of the Speaker of the National Assembly, that must be addressed. There is no way a ruling coalition can have a partner who becomes the head of the second or third organ of government being an affiliate of a leading coalition. You can never have impartiality, and that is why currently Honorable Sabina Chege, despite the fact that she has been whipped by the political party, still holds out, masquerades, and holds out as the chief whip for the party.
Thank you so much, Governor.
May I just answer the question by Honorable Amalwa? Yeah.
30 seconds, Governor. Kindly, you'll agree with me. You've now done 1.5 hours.
The specific numbers are the following. I'll just read the numbers. 24,499 polling stations for the Azimio candidate, 21,703 polling stations. You asked what is it in terms of electoral wards. 803 electoral wards, 648 for the KK candidate. In terms of constituencies, and remember here when we count constituencies, we count diaspora. So it should add up to 291. 160 versus 131.
Thank you, Governor. I think we'll end it there. Thank you very much, Azimio, for coming and making a good decision. I just really wish to Governor Derito, I just really wish you were the finance minister of the past regime, because the debt we are in will not be struggling paying debt had things been done well. That's a fact. Today ni siku ya kusema ukweli. I wish you were the one.
You also did not come here to co-opt him.
But I think they'll do a good job as an opposition.
We thank the committee for the time accorded us. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Asante sana. Please use the door to the right to exit so that the others can come in. Thank you.
The cost parliamentary.